The Torah reading this week, Parshat Mishpatim, has within it 53 of the 613 mitzvot, more mitzvot than we've had in the entire Torah up until this point, 23 positive commandments and 30 negative commandments. And it's attached to last week's reading of the Aseret HaDibrot of the Ten Commandments. How do we know that? Because it says, Ve'ela HaMishpatim, and these are the laws. And Mishpatim refer to laws, to mitzvot in the Torah, which are rational, which can be understood, unlike laws that defy logic, such laws as the red heifer, the ashes of the red heifer. Is this a come down, though, to turn our attention to laws that are daily, practical, civil laws, tort laws, damages, custodial laws, which dominate this week's Torah reading? So in one comment, Rabbi Beryl Wine says, this is the reality of life, that we go from the grandeur of the revelation at Sinai to the pettiness of human nature. And although that's a legitimate point, I want to try to refine that a little bit with tonight's presentation, where we're going to talk about our money, ourselves. And in some ways, the title could almost sound anti-Semitic, like a trope. But we know from many aspects of the Torah that in an emotional level, perhaps not in a logical level, but when it comes to our real human reactions, our instinctual decisions, and the way we think about the world, in many ways, our money plays very, very significantly in our minds. And I often refer to a statement in the Talmud which says, Adam Nikar, you can recognize a person through three aspects of their personality. What are they? They're kiso, koso, and kaso, words that come together in Hebrew. But kiso means the way they spend their money. Kaso means what they say when they're angry, and koso means what comes out of them when they're drunk. But it shows that how we choose to spend our money in daily life, and certainly the importance that we place on our physical security. And of course, money means more than just physical security. It also involves our place of honor and our place of dignity and our competitive nature and our jealousy of other people. And many, many, many aspects of human nature come together under the topic of money. So let's explore this idea. And we encounter it first and foremost in the Torah, a statement in the Talmud, in Baba Kama, page 30. It says, Hai man deboy mihavi chasida. If a person wants to become a chassid, and at the time of the Talmud, there were no chassidim as we know them today, but it means a person who's enthusiastic and joyful and who integrates the great values of Torah within themselves, a level of living which is above and beyond the normal expectation of the Torah. So what does the Talmud recommend? Let a person be very mindful. Let him study and inculcate and practice the laws of damages, many of which are part of this week's Torah reading. It's a very significant idea. And what is the Talmud teaching us here? It's clearly teaching us that by focusing on our responsibility towards other people, a person can grow immensely, grow in terms of seeing their own place within the world properly, in proper proportion, and in terms of their sensitivity to other people. I mean, we also have directly in this week's Torah reading a mitzvah not to oppress the stranger and the widow, which is quoted very often. Why doesn't the Talmud refer to those types of mitzvahs as being the key ingredients? And perhaps in the theme of this class, we can understand that people have an attachment to their money, and that when I start considering carefully, will what I'm doing now cause a damage? Will it inconvenience other people? Will it cause a loss of money? Can I act in a way which will protect the interests of others better? And the Talmud, of course, considers very mundane daily life experiences all the time. For example, pouring wastewater out into the street. Now, when you think about it, it's far-fetched for us, but we live with plumbing and indoor sewage and everything else. But just imagine the person who's carrying out a heavy bucket of water after a day of washing the dishes, something as innocuous as that. And they're schlepping it out, looking for a place that they could pour out this water. Is it their own personal convenience that comes first, and I'll just dump it over the fence and out into the street? Yeah, it'll be a little muddy. Yeah, people have to watch for the puddle, but what's the big deal? Along comes the Jewish law, these Mishpatim, and says that I can be liable for damages if someone falls. So through the medium of fiscal responsibility, the Torah is awakening us in an important sense what our responsibilities are to others, our responsibility to see beyond ourselves. And of course, we can expand upon that and expand upon it step by step. So what the Talmud's saying is not that the meticulous judicial person is the representative of Hasidus, of the ultimate attainment of spiritual height, but rather that if you want to reach in that direction, this is an important avenue and an important channel that a person could follow. And similarly, I saw quoted by Rabbi Harris a few recently that Rabbeinu Yonah, one of the early thinkers in terms of ethics and moral development in the Torah, is quoted as writing that if a person is working on a spiritual matter, let's say a person wants to concentrate more on their studies, or a person wants to be very mindful about what comes out of their mouth and decides that my language needs to be more refined. So he has a suggestion, a very mundane suggestion. He says, fine yourself every time you say a word that you feel is not appropriate, every time you put someone down. Set up a little pushka and put a few pennies aside every time you catch yourself. He says that's a great way to spur your growth and make you more mindful. And it's not because every penny is so hurtful, but because money counts for each of us. It speaks to us. And perhaps in many levels of growth and moral responsibility, our money will be the spur and the opener for us to grow in sensitivity and grow in awareness. And that's what Rabbeinu Yonah suggests. A direct reference. We say the Shema twice a day. It's a mitzvah in the Torah. Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. An encompassing statement of faith. And then we say, V'yohavta et Hashem Elokecha. You should love the Lord your God, B'chol levavcha, with all your heart, B'chol nafshecha, with your very soul, with your life, U'b'chol me'odecha, with all your resources, / with all your money. And Rashi on the spot quotes a Mechilta that says, not surprisingly in this context, there are people for whom their money is more valuable than their life. And obviously he's asking a question. If the Torah has already stated for us that we should love the Lord our God with all of our heart and even at the pain of giving up our lives, isn't it trite? Isn't it trivial to then say, and with all of our possessions? If I'm so committed, then of course my money pales in comparison. But Rashi says explicitly here, there are individual people that take their money more dearly than their lives. And clearly it's not an intellectual exercise where if someone says to you, your money or your life, and you say, let me think about it, as Jack Benny once quipped, and which caught the attention of the world in a humorous vein, on an emotional level, you'd be surprised what lengths people are willing to go to protect their money. And do we not hear about, read about, learn about Nebuch people who lose their lives in an effort to protect some aspect of their possessions? And they don't do it by making a calculation that this is more important to me than my life, but they end up acting that way anyway. And just parenthetically, when we have a mitzvah of redeeming the firstborn, if a person has a child and it's a boy and it's the firstborn to the wife, to the woman, so we have a pidyon abain, and in the course of the pidyon abain, the redemption of that firstborn child, the father states, I'm giving up this money, and in exchange, I'm taking responsibility for the life of my child. And Rabbi Ruderman from Ney Yisrael was fond of pointing it out to people that we know, it's a topic that, for example, Arthur Miller, the playwright, always explored over and over again. Do we not know so often that people, at the expense of their relationship with their children, or even for the sake of providing a legacy for their children, end up miscalculating and leading to a lot of alienation and many, many problems in the family? Another reference, and this is a very stark reference. If you look in the book of Genesis and Sefer Bereshit, and it's chapter 43, sentence 18, it's on page 243 in the Art Scroll Chumash. At the moment when the brothers of Joseph were being led back to face the music of having been accused of stealing the cup of the viceroy of Egypt, they say, "V'lakachat otanu la'avodim," that we're being taken for slaves, ve'et chamarenu, and even our donkeys will be confiscated. Now, there are different opinions in the commentaries. The more esoteric one says that they were thinking to themselves that all this food that we were bringing back for our wives and children and our families to ensure that they would survive the famine is all going to be taken away from us. And that certainly could be part of their thinking. But on a deep level, Maimonides says that it is not uncommon for people to fear the loss of their property as much as they would fear the loss of their own lives and freedom. And then Maimonides adds, and for some people, they fear that even more. Now, I think the idea of the sense of fear here, we're dealing in the emotional level of a person. How often do we see that our emotional makeup dictates our behavior more so than our intellectual calculations that we make? And when we're asked calmly, well, if it cost you $1 million to escape from a situation, would you mortgage your whole future and do that? Of course I would. Life is very precious, the sanctity of human life. But in practice, it doesn't work that way, especially on day-by-day circumstances. And I think we all can think of many illustrations that we've seen how this plays out in human nature. So let's look at two of the 53 mitzvot that are in this week's Torah reading with this lens literally on focus. We have the following commandment. It's ki tifka shor oivcha ochamaro. It's on page 433 in the Stone Chumash, and it's a group of mitzvot. Let's read it so that we can get it exactly right. It's chapter 23, and we'll start at sentence 4. We'll start sentence 3 even. It's a little earlier. Again, Mishpatim, chapter 23, sentence 3, where we do not glorify a destitute person in his grievance. So this is a mitzvah which applies to judges. If you're judging a case, a person is not allowed to say, in front of me is a case that involves a claim of $1,000. One person is rich, $1,000 doesn't mean much to him. The other person is poor, $1,000 means a lot to him. Let me skew the law in favor of the poor person. You're not allowed to do that. person has to have the honesty to see past these kind of considerations and recognize the fact that within the pristine setting of a court of law, truth has to be the highest value. And then the Or Chaim adds a comment. This is all in the Art Scroll Chumash. You can read it yourself. The Or Chaim says, perhaps even the judge might think the poor person spiritually might feel cut off from God. And especially since he sees, gee, I'm going to have to fork over $1,000 to this guy for whom that means so little. It's just an unfair world. God's not as just as people think God is, or whatever considerations I want to impute that would make me, the judge, feel as though I'm going to do something that's less than perfectly honest. Torah says, no, you may not do that. So in this vein, in upholding truth, the Torah continues, if you encounter an ox of your enemy or his donkey wandering, you shall return it to him repeatedly, even if it's over and over again. So first of all, in general, I'm in a situation where my next door neighbor keeps leaving his gate open and his dog runs out, and I run out into the street and I bring the dog back in and I close the gate once. And I don't even like the guy. He's not a good neighbor. He's not someone that I feel close to. And then it happens again. I've got to run out again and rescue it. And we're putting aside here the well-being of the animal, which of course is a consideration. But I need to do that. Why does the Torah specify the idea that it's an enemy? Because a person has a certain yetzer hara. A person has a certain evil inclination that when you don't like somebody, you're ready to rejoice hearing bad news about the person. And the Torah is giving consideration to that. And the Torah wants us to grow beyond such feelings and such thoughts and to become bigger people. And this is this mitzvah, and it's an obligation from the Torah that over and over again, I have a responsibility to return this object on behalf of the person and to safeguard his property. Here again, we see how consideration of financial issues can create within a person an opportunity for moral, ethical growth and development, especially on the emotional level. And then we get the kicker in the next sentence, sentence 5. If you see the donkey of someone you hate crouching under its burden, would you refrain from helping him? You shall help repeatedly with him. And here we get into a moral complexity, because part of the idea of unloading this donkey that's collapsing under its load does involve relieving the pain and suffering of the donkey. And it's one of the sources that is quoted from which we learn that tsar balei chayim, that causing pain, unnecessary pain to an animal, is prohibited in the Torah. But the Talmud plays it out. What is the Torah here talking about? The Torah is talking about if you're in a busy marketplace and there are two donkeys wavering under their load. One is from your friend, and the other is from your enemy. And an enemy can mean someone who has legitimately wronged you, someone who has perhaps caused spiritual harm in the community, and you've taken a stand to warn that person and to try to correct that person. All these considerations fall to the side, again, because what's cited here is this idea, because deep down, what kind of person are you? How big are you? How close are you to being a chassid, a person who's enthusiastically embracing an agenda of building the Jewish people and demonstrating the idea that every Jewish person is connected to every other Jewish person? Or to what extent are you the small, sarcastic person? Do you hear what happened to Joe? I mean, we know he's a rotten person, but his load crashed in the marketplace last week. And much to his embarrassment, he had to spend the rest of the day picking up all of his items in the middle of the street. No, that's what I have to fight off. That's why if my friend and my enemy are both in my visual perspective realm of seeing, and I have to choose which one I'm going to help right now, I can't even run the excuse, well, he's my friend. I have to help him. It's the opposite. He's my enemy. And the Torah says, help him first. And as soon as you've secured his load and protected him from damage, run over to the other one and help over there. And now we'll get to laws that are a little bit harsher to understand, but really convey the same topic. And it's chapter 21, sentences 28, 29, and it's on page 422 in the Art Scroll Chumash. And it reads as follows. If an ox shall gore a man or a woman, and he shall die, the ox shall surely be put to death, stoned, and its flesh may not be eaten, and the owner of the ox is innocent. But if it was an ox that gored habitually from yesterday and the day, was established as being dangerous, and its owner had been warned but did not guard it, did not place extra guards on it, and it killed a man or a woman, the ox shall be stoned, and even its owner shall die. Now, there's no capital punishment here. We don't kill the owner. And commentaries are very clear to say we're not punishing the animal. Animals act with instinct. They don't have freedom of choice. Animals, the word behema means bama, it is what it is. It lives out its lives. People that love animals say animals are created perfectly. And people who have pets of their own that they're attached to, that's the way they see them, and God bless all of them. The issue here is not becoming angry and vengeful and killing an animal. The animal is killed in both situations because we have as a society to stand up and always affirm the sanctity of human life. And killing the animal, even though the animal is blameless in all cases, because that's the instinctual nature of that animal and it has no free choice, but eliminating that animal is a manner of the society expressing the ultimate value of human life. And so there can't be a cow grazing in the field that someone could point to and say, oh, that cow killed a person or two people or three people, or even has to be eliminated, has to be put down. When it comes to the owner, however, we're talking about a whole different story. But the owner becomes liable even for death in God's hands, nothing that we execute as a court, because that's the extent of responsibility a person is expected to have when it comes to, if I own an animal, if I own a cow, if I own an ox, I accept upon myself and I have to have it. It plows my field, it provides for my family, that's my business, my livelihood. Even if it's not my livelihood, even if I'm taking in and sheltering animals that otherwise would be mistreated, whatever the cause is, whatever the issue might be, I have to understand that my responsibility to others is absolute. And that's why the Torah adds also the prohibition that I can't benefit from its meat. I can't shech the animal first, slaughter it ritually, then eat the meat. I can't sell the carcass. The owner, can derive no benefit whatsoever from an animal where I needed to accept upon myself that responsibility. Why? Because these are ways of the Torah reminding me that instead of me saying, look at all the heads of cattle I have, look at my wealth, look at what I'm accomplishing, look at the big business I have, I also need to feel emotionally. Look what a responsibility I have to protect everyone else in society, and that my gain can never be at the expense, certainly of the life of another person, or even at the oppression of another person. These are the big themes. And I want to end with a story. It's a famous story, but I think it brings out this connection between our money and ourselves in a very beautiful way. The story is about Reb Nosson Tzvi Finkel. He was the Alter of Slobodka, the head of the yeshiva from which the yeshiva I attended, the Chavetz Chaim Yeshiva, came as a legacy. And he once had a student who was newly married. And he stopped the student cryptically and he said, "Hey, let me ask you a question. Do you help your wife as she prepares for Shabbos?" Student said, "Help my wife. Shabbos? I love preparing for Shabbos. Oh, it's such a holy day. It's so sanctified. Oh, Shabbos is so valuable to me," thinking that that's what Rabbi Finkel was inquiring of him. And Rabbi Finkel said to him, "No. You know why you should be helping your wife? Not because of the honor of Shabbos." He said, "What about the mitzvah to help unload a donkey? The mitzvah we just referred to a few minutes ago in this week's Torah reading." Student must have looked at him perplexed. Was he misogynist? What's going on here? And the answer was this. He wanted him to understand that don't think that my love of Shabbos, it shows what a spectacular, spiritual, great person I am. And that must be what the rabbi was inquiring. The rabbi wants to know, are you a loving husband? Are you sensitive to the needs of everybody in your family? When you think about having a beautiful Shabbos, are you not also sensitive to the hard work and effort that has to be put in to make a beautiful Shabbos? And are you not willing to and excited about helping and assisting your wife so that the Shabbos should be less of a burden and more enjoyable for each and every member of the family? So in conclusion, what we see here is something very wondrous. Last week was the 10 Commandments, 5 commandments between man and God, 5 commandments between man and man. Those link together on the most fundamental of ways, because in so many ways, our money and ourselves are inseparable.